Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're all here today. You are in for a treat. We have the wonderful Joshua Becker here today. And I'm going to, in case you're not familiar with him, I wanted to give you just kind of a brief overview of he has an amazing resume, a lot of accolades. So, Joshua, if you didn't know, is a #1 Wall Street Journal and US Today best-selling author of 5 books. I know he has another book he's currently working on. They have been translated into 14 different languages and have sold over 1 million copies worldwide. He is worldwide and writing inspire millions of people around the world to live with more purpose, passion, and joy through his articles, videos, and speaking engagements. Over 9 million people read his articles every year. If you want to check him out, you should go to Becoming Minimalist. That is his website, which is dedicated to intentional living, which has over 1 million readers every month, with the social media followed over by 3 million people. His blog was named Success Magazine as one of the top 10 personal development websites on the internet. He's also a creator of Simplify Media, the parent company of Simplify Magazine and Simple Money Magazine. He's the founder of The Hope Effect, a nonprofit organization changing how the world cares for orphans. His online course, Uncluttered, has helped over 75,000 people declutter their homes and live a more intentional life focused on the things that mattered most. But all these wonderful things that Josh does every day and people read all of his articles, they're very inspiring and very moving. And so I just feel like this is really wonderful for us today because here we are at the week of gratitude. And Josh was going to help us think about these distractions and things that get the way of intentional living. And if you haven't picked up a copy of his latest book, you're all going to be getting one, by the way. It's called Things That Matter. And so we'll make sure that all of you get one of those books as soon as they get here. If you have not signed in this morning, we have the table over there. Make sure you sign in. And then before you leave, there's a QR code on the table that you can scan. And we would love for you to do like a reflection for us and let us know what you thought of our event today. There's many other, if you notice on your table also, a list of other Week of Gratitude events going on this week. They're all really fun and wonderful. We started this morning with a fun run. That was a great way to get out and get our blood moving, and so it was a lot of fun. So hopefully you'll take part in some of our other events. But without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Joshua Becker.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to hear me after that introduction. Oh, well, good. It is good to be here. My second time, and she is right. I am working on a book right now, and it is due in 4 weeks. And so it's really good to be here because putting off writing. But anyway, it's good to be here. I want to talk today about, I got to go back and forth here a little bit while I click these buttons. The conversation I want to talk about is how to overcome distraction to pursue a more meaningful life. But I want to warn you that this isn't going to be like go put your phone in a drawer and go to the other room, or turn your screen to grayscale so it doesn't distract you, or delete TikTok or whatever it might be. A lot of times when we talk about distraction, we think about our phones, we think about technology, which is indeed a huge distraction in our lives and something that we should talk about today for sure. But the conversations that I want to have today are much deeper and are much richer. I think many of the reasons that we get distracted by our phones, we get distracted by fashion, we get distracted by money, we get distracted by whatever might be distracting us from meaning and fulfillment in life, that it's actually a better indicator of something deeper going on in our hearts and in our lives. And so I'm really glad you're here. We're going to have a really deep and rich conversation. Is that all right? And I'm going to have a few discussion questions for you around your table, so you can look forward to that. Yeah? Okay, good. A few discussion questions along the way, and then I will leave time for questions at the end, of course. My journey into this conversation about how the distractions of life can keep us from meaning and purpose and significance started way back 15 years ago. I began thinking about this and wondering about it and questioning my own life and noticing things around me. Three stories that really got me started down this journey, which is the book that we're talking about, Things That Matter. The book that I wrote a couple years ago is all about this stuff. But it started in, I remember the month. It was November 2009. So 15 years ago, I was at my computer. I had just started blogging. I had started a website. I was trying to figure out how to grow a website and how to get people to follow you on social media. And so I was kind of interested in watching what people were following and how people were growing their platform. One particular evening, I'm sitting at my dining room table, and up pops this article that everybody online started talking about. The article was called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. The top 5 regrets of the dying, which is interesting because whenever anybody hears the title of the article, they want to know what they are. Like, what are the top 5 regrets of the dying? And so I saw the article, I clicked through, I read it. I started noticing how it started spreading everywhere. It got spread on like every social media platform. Millions of people went to read this article. She wrote a book about it. She still talks about it. She was on like every newspaper in the world. And so it was very interesting to me. But her story is Ronnie Ware. She lived in Australia and she started a blog about her 3 greatest passions in life, which were nature, travel, and possums. These were her 3. She was passionate about nature, travel, and possums. And so she started writing articles about those 3 things. She got about 5 articles in, and I think she said everything that she could think to say about possums, apparently. And so she was a nurse. She'd been a nurse for decades. She cared for people at the end of their life. And so she just sat down and she wrote an article. It wasn't scientific at all. It was just based on the conversations that she had had with dying people. And she said, these are the top 5 regrets that people have when they reach the end of their life more than anything else. And as I mentioned, the article immediately went viral. And to this day, if you Google top 5 regrets of the dying, you will find her article. What was interesting to me was not so much the list, although the list is interesting. But what was interesting to me was how interested people were in that conversation. And it really showed me something that I think we know to be true, but we don't articulate very often, that no one wants to get to the end of their life with a bunch of regrets. Everyone wants to get to the end of their life proud of the decisions they made and how they chose to live their life, as opposed to looking back at a bunch of regret. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have any regrets, but generally speaking, how can we get to the end of our life with fewer regrets? This was November. The very next month, I went to see my grandfather. He was about 90 years old at the time. My grandpa called me in for a meeting, and which had never happened before in my life. And so I went to my grandpa's office. My grandpa was a pastor up in South Dakota. I went to his office. I sat across this big wooden desk that he'd sat at for 40 or 50 years. And I said, "What's with the meeting?" And he said, "Well, Joshua, I have something for you." And he took a sheet of paper and he slid it across the desk. And I picked up the sheet of paper, and written across the top, it said, "Funeral service for Harold Salem," which was his name. I looked down the list. He had planned out his entire funeral, all the songs that he wanted sang, the Bible verses he wanted read, who was going to carry in the coffin, who he wanted to do the eulogy, everything listed, like to the minute, how long each element was supposed to take. And I glanced down, and there was my name during one part of the funeral. And he said, "Joshua, I want to ask you to do this part in my funeral." Now, my grandpa was perfectly healthy. He lived to be 99 and a half, so he lived another 10 years after this conversation. It didn't surprise me a ton that my grandpa would have planned out his funeral. I think just as a pastor and doing this so many times, I think he just had a general idea of what he wanted his to look like. But what surprised me about the conversation and what I remember to this day is I remember looking up from the sheet of paper and I looked into the eyes of my grandpa. And I looked into the eyes of a man who wasn't afraid of dying, if that makes sense. Not only was he not afraid of what would happen after he would die, but he wasn't afraid of the idea of his life coming to an end. Does that make sense? He started talking to me about the decisions that he had made, the life he had lived, what he had given himself to, what was important to him. And he talked about life. He talked about life in such a confident way that death wasn't something to fear or avoid. It was just the natural next last step of the life that he had lived. And I walked away from the conversation thinking to myself, how do I get to that side of the desk? 1 month earlier, I just read this long article about all these people with all these regrets of their life. And a month later, my grandpa is talking about death, not afraid of it. How do I live my life? How do any of us live our lives in a way that we can get to that side of the desk? 2 months later, so all these things happen in a span of about 3 months. Bronny Ware, my grandpa. 2 months later, I run across a quote from a guy named Seneca. He's a philosopher in Rome, and he says this. And as I began to ask, how do I live a meaningful, purposeful life? This is what Seneca says. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of our lives. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us if it were all well invested. Catch this. But when life is wasted in heedless luxury, and when life is spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize it passed away before we knew it was passing. So it is, we are not given a short life, but we make it short. Life is long if we know how to live it. I think he summarized everything I had been wrestling with for months, even a decade later, wrestling with. How do we live meaningful, purpose-filled lives? We do it by recognizing distractions in life, overcoming those distractions so that we can live every day for things that matter in the long run. So we can live our lives for things that we are proud of every single day. And when we do that, we live full, meaningful lives. So, like I said, no easy answers today, but I hope a hope-filled, invitational, motivational message on what our lives can be and what we can accomplish. I mean, this is a good-looking group right here. This is a good-looking group. We've got tons of potential, tons of opportunity. These people right here, like we have opportunity to change the world. We have opportunity to help people, influence people, make a difference. And so let's live lives that do that. So how do we do that? Well, I think we do that by we overcome the distractions that surround us to pursue meaning. However we define meaning in our lives, how do we overcome distraction to do it? I'm going to go through I got 7 steps, 7 keys, but a couple of them will be a little bit shorter than the others. So 7 keys on how we live lives that overcome distraction. The first thing we need to do is we need to define what our mission is in life. You need to define what your mission, what your purpose, what your desire, what your values are in life. Now, I'm not talking about the things that you want to accomplish. I'll talk about that later. But I'm talking about what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of values do you want to build your life upon? Stephen Covey wrote this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in the book, he talks about how effective people begin with the end in mind. And then he gives this brilliant illustration of an airplane taking off from one airport and heading to another. And he says that en route, an airplane, over 90% of its flight path from airport A to airport B is off the most direct route from one airport to the other. Sometimes it has to move around traffic. Sometimes it has to go around storms. Sometimes it has to change altitude to get above or below clouds. Sometimes just the wind will drift it off of its path and it has to course correct. And then he says this, however, which is so brilliant. He says, but because the pilot knows where he or she is trying to land the plane arrives at the right destination. And so it is with life. That life, we get thrown a ton of curveballs. We go through times where we feel like we're making great progress in life. We feel like we're just slogging along at times. Distractions pop up. We make poor decisions. Other people make poor decisions around us, and we get kind of blown off kilter. But when we have decided where we want to land the plane of our life, we're able to course correct and get there. The problem is that most people never even sit down to think about, what do I want my life to be about? What is the purpose of my life? What is the mission for my life? What are the values that are important to me? Most of us never even sit down to do that. And we're like just taking off in a plane and we're just flying in any and every which way direction without having any purpose or meaning to it. And when we don't have any purpose and when we don't have any meaning, this is when distractions begin to pop up and begin to distract us from the life that we wish we were living. There's another murder in the building, and all of a sudden we got to go through every episode of the season. Love Island introduces some new woman from somewhere, and suddenly we're just engrossed in whatever might be going on. We scroll endlessly through our phones at the end of the day. Some new money opportunity pops up that we begin chasing after money because we haven't sat down to decide what is going to be the most important things for me. The way we do this, by the way, is there's only one way we can do this. It is we sit down quietly by ourselves and we give this some thought. We just sit down quietly, put the phone away, turn off the TV, turn off music, just sit quietly in a room, look into your heart, search your heart and your soul, and decide what are the things that are most important to me. Me, I have 3 things. Number one, I want to follow. I was a pastor for 15 years, so I want to follow God with my life. Number 2, I want to love the people in my life as best I can. I want to love my wife. I want to love my kids. I want to serve those who are around me. Number 3, I want to have the greatest impact for good in the world with the one life that I have to live. Those are the 3 things that define my mission and my purpose in life. And I'm able to evaluate what things are entering my life, what is helping me move in that direction, and what is not. Let me go through this next one a little bit quick, and then I'm going to have you share something with your table, which will be fun. Number two. So number one is we choose a mission. We define our mission. Number two is we choose goals that are worth pursuing. We choose goals with our life. I like to define the difference between mission and goals this way. If mission is where I want the plane of my life to end, goals are the stepping stones along the way that get me there. So my mission, the three things that are most important to me, are never going to change. But what that looks like in any given season of life will look different. My kids are just graduated high school. They're both in college right now. And so what it looks like for me to be a loving father looks very different today than it did 15 years ago. In the same way, the book that I'm writing today is a different book than I would have written 15 years ago, but I still feel like that goal moves me towards the mission that I have in life. I learned this at a workshop over in Mesa. I was at a workshop put on by a guy named Chandler-Gilbert. He had written a book called Start Finishing, just a brilliant title, Start Finishing. And he had put on this workshop about how do we finish the projects in our life. And he started us with a question that I'm going to have each of you think about for a moment. But the question he asked us is this. He said, close your eyes, and I want you to answer this question. If you were to die today, what is the one project in life? What is the one thing in life you would most regret not getting done? If you died today, what is the one thing you would most regret that you never completed? We were at a table. I had a book idea that came, actually Things That Matter was the book that came out of that specific question. There was a woman in her mid-30s. Her kids were early teens. She said, I would regret that I didn't get to prepare my kids for life. There was a girl who had just graduated college. She had started an art project in college but never finished. She said, I would regret that I never finished that art project that I started. It was so important to me. But when we answer this question and we get focused on what the goal is in life that is most important to us, maybe it's just graduating college. Like maybe that's the season of life that you're in right now, and that's the goal that you need to finish. But these, when we know what we want to pursue, when we know what we want to accomplish, it becomes easier to put aside the distractions that are keeping us from the goal. So you don't all have to answer, but let me have you turn to your table and what popped into your mind? If you're to die today, what is the one thing you would most regret that you didn't accomplish with your life? Go ahead. All right, take about 30 more seconds, finish up, unless you're all done already. Okay, good. Keep that on your minds. Keep that on your minds and put yourself to it. And the best thing about goals is that we accomplish them and then we find another one and we find another one, we find another one. Each time moving our lives forward. Number 3, we embrace doing hard things. I just want to mention, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one. But man, whatever you wrote, whatever you thought about for your goal that you want to accomplish, like it's not going to happen unless you embrace the idea of putting in some effort and doing some hard things. The greatest things that you will accomplish in life will not be easy for you to do. And I'm going to let you apply this however you need to apply it in your life. But man, I got to tell you, we get 2 options with every single day. Every single day we wake up and we can make the most of our time or we can waste our time. And I'm telling you, I'm pretty convinced that it is the people who waste their days, who get to the end of their life and wonder what happened to all their time. On the other hand, when we embrace the idea of putting in hard work, putting in effort, making most of the time that we have, that this is when we get to the end of our lives and we're proud of what we did and we're proud of what we accomplished. Assuming, of course, we're chasing the right things. But I think if we're going to accomplish those things that we came up with in number 2, then at some point we embrace the idea of doing hard things. I could go on a whole long diatribe about America's fascination with early retirement these days and how quickly people are trying to get out of doing work. And I got to tell you, there is so much meaning and fulfillment and joy that we find when we put in a good day's work. Not just a job, obviously, but serving other people and helping other people. Number 4, if we're going to overcome distraction to pursue a more meaningful life, there's a step in here where we need to look inward and we just need to evaluate who we are, the way that we're living our lives, and the stories that we're telling ourselves about the lives that we live. So I did a survey. I did a nationwide survey, and I asked the question. Well, I'll just give you the answer. I forget how he phrased the question. But the answer is, I was flipping through this survey that we did, and I was going through all these results, and one of them just stopped me dead in my tracks. And it said this, that 60% of Americans feel like they can't live the life they want to live because of a mistake that they made in their past. It could have been just one mistake. It could have been a series of mistakes, but they feel like they can't live the life they want because of something that happened in their past. 60% of us, 3 out of every 5 persons in this room. The second question was even harder to read. 55% of us think that we can't live the life we want because of something that someone else did to us in the past. So a lot of overlap here, and I would say a mistake that we did in the past, like some of the things that people have done to other people aren't mistakes, they're just downright evil. 60% of us can't live the life we want, 55% of us, a lot of overlap between those 2 numbers. But man, that is a lot of potential. That is a lot of people in this room right now who feel like they can't become the person they want, they can't live the life that they want because of something that happened in their past. And I just want to tell you, if that is you, there are no easy answers to how you overcome that. But you can. And the first thing is that you need to turn and you need to face it. You need to have a conversation with a friend to start this. You need to find a counselor. You need to find some help here on campus. I'm sure there's so much help available to you. But you don't have to live your whole life being tethered to something that happened in your past, whether you made the decision or someone else did. If we're ever going to get to the end of our lives without regret, at some point we need to work and begin dealing with some of this stuff. The other part that I mentioned in Look Inward is just are we living lives of character? Are we living lives of integrity? Are we honest people? Are we loving people? Are we selfless? Are we patient? Are we compassionate? Do we pursue justice and humility, even cheerfulness? It's fascinating. You can go back thousands of years and you can find people, Benjamin Franklin, Socrates, like all listing out virtues of humankind. And it's really interesting that across all of the centuries, across all of the cultures, like there are some things that define good people, meaningful people, people who are proud of the lives that they live, and they almost always all overlap. And so, again, an entire conversation could be said about our honesty and our integrity and our morality. But I think if we're going to live lives that we're proud of, at some point we got to decide if we're doing that and if we're living lives that we can be proud of. Number 5, let me spend a little more time on this one. At some point, if we're going to overcome distraction, we need to identify the distractions that trip you up, the distractions that trip us up. And they look different for each person. I think there's some pretty common ones in America today that trip up a lot of people. But there are others that trip us up more than other people. So 16 years ago, I was introduced to minimalism, which is what I talked about last time I was here. This is my second time getting to speak at this beautiful campus. Spoke more specifically about minimalism. I don't even remember how many years ago it was, but it was pre-COVID, which was a very different time. 16 years ago, short story, I was cleaning out my garage. My son was 5, my daughter was 2. My son wanted me to play catch with him in the backyard, but I was cleaning out my garage. I'd pulled everything out in the driveway. I'd spent hours working on my garage while my son was begging me to come play with him. At some point, I start talking to my neighbor, and I'm complaining. I think she's noticing what's happening. And I'm complaining about how many hours had gone into cleaning out my stupid garage. And she says, you know, that's why my daughter is a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own all this stuff. And I looked at my driveway. It had this pile of dirty, dusty possessions that I'd spent all morning cleaning up. Even more than that, I'd spent almost my entire life pursuing and accumulating and buying. It was just dirty and dusty, a big pile of clutter, basically. And as she mentioned that, I looked at the pile of stuff in my driveway, and I saw my 5-year-old son swinging alone on the swing set in the backyard. And suddenly I realized that all the things that I had bought, all the things that I had purchased weren't making me happy, as we would all say. But even worse, all the things I had bought were actually keeping me away from the very thing that did bring me happiness in life. And not just happiness, but joy and meaning, significance and purpose. That morning, I decided to become a minimalist. That morning, I decided that I would just own the things that I needed to own in order to live my fullest, most meaningful, most purposeful life, because my possessions had become a distraction from meaning in my life. I got rid of 60, 70% of my stuff, and we'll do Q&A. I'm happy to talk about that if you want. But as I started getting rid of the things in my life, I noticed how much of a distraction they had become, which is very interesting because the world, like society, marketers, culture, will like constantly tell you that you should be buying more and more stuff, that all these things are going to make you happy. Like we just watched a whole football game with like every commercial was telling us, you'll be better off if you buy this thing, if you buy this thing, if you buy this thing. But what was interesting was none of those things was making my life better. They were actually distracting me from the things that did improve the quality of my life. And so I started to wonder, like, what other things are we told will make us happy, but in reality keep us from happiness? I think the pursuit of money all the time can keep us from happiness, the pursuit of possessions, the pursuit of praise, the pursuit of leisure, sometimes the pursuit of happiness, looking in the wrong places. Certainly, technology can get in the way. Sometimes fear can get us in the way. That can become a distraction. I just love, by the way, if you're afraid, if you have any fear, if you have fear that you need to overcome, there's a whole class being offered tomorrow, which I think anyone can go to, dealing with some of these things. The distractions that trip you up are going to be different than the ones that trip me up. But at some point, we have to recognize our tendencies. We have to recognize the lies that we're being told about what will make us happy, and instead find the things that actually will make us happy. Number 6, we celebrate our uniqueness. I used to say that we should accept our uniqueness. And by this, I mean we stop comparing ourselves to other people. We stop comparing what other people have. We stop comparing the talents that other people have. We stop comparing the family that someone else has, the boyfriend or the girlfriend that someone else has, the whatever that someone else does really good that we wish we did good. And instead, we celebrate what we do well, what we bring into the world, what our passions are, what our experience is, what our education is, what our talents are. We don't just accept the fact that we're different, but we celebrate the fact that we're different, because the reality is the world needs all of us. The world needs all of us living our best lives, doing what we're passionate about, doing what we're good at, not for our own selfish gain, but so that the world around us benefits. I think this is why gratitude is so important. I almost renamed this just for the sake of this week. Like, this is gratitude, isn't it? That when we stop looking at what everyone else has and we start taking some time slowly to count the blessings that we have, to count the good things that we have in our lives. I actually think so many of these steps begin with gratitude and begin with appreciating what we have, appreciating what our purpose is, appreciating what our talents are, and the passions that we have and the goals that we have, appreciating our past and who we are. At some point, we need to celebrate our uniqueness. The last one is this. We're going to overcome distraction to pursue meaning. We need to believe in our unmet potential. We need to believe in our unmet potential. I love that we have all sorts of different ages in this room, because it doesn't matter what age you are, there is unmet potential in your life. There are more things that you can do. There are more things that you can accomplish. And let me tell you this. You can accomplish more with your life than you ever thought possible. I'll close with this story. My son and I, years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, we hiked Humphreys Peak up in Flagstaff, which is the tallest mountain in Arizona. It's over 12,000 feet. My son and I had never done any hiking, but we just said, let's just do the tallest thing first, right? So we set out on this trail. We're hiking this. Has anyone hiked it? Humphreys Peak? A few of you? Okay. We're starting out on the trail, and there's this sign at the bottom, and it said, "Caution, 3 false peaks ahead," which I didn't think much of, because I didn't know what a false peak was. We keep going a little bit farther. We round this corner, and there's another sign, "Caution, 3 false peaks ahead." A little later on, there's a third sign, "Caution, 3 false peaks ahead," which by that time, I start thinking to myself, I wish I knew what a false peak was because this sounds kind of important. Anyway, we started hiking. It's brutal. It rains on us. It hails on us. We're up above the tree line, but we're still going. We're still pushing forward. And suddenly we can see the top of the mountain. And I'm like, Salem, let's just get to the top and so we can say that we did it and we never have to do this again. So we push forward. We get to the top of the mountain. And as soon as we do, I learn what a false peak is. So a false peak is when you're climbing the mountain from your angle, you think you see what is the top, but in actuality, the real top is just hidden from where you are on the mountain. And so, like, okay, I guess we got to keep going. So we keep going, we get to the next top, and we find out that that's not the peak. And then we keep going, we get to another one, and I don't know what, I forget how many there's supposed to be. I don't know what counts as a false peak. But like we just keep pressing forward in life until eventually we reached the absolute top. I think that mountain is a great metaphor for the lives that we live. And I mean it this way. From this vantage point right now, from wherever you're sitting, whatever year you're in school, whatever job you're working, whatever career goal you have in you, do you have this picture of what your potential is and might be in life? But what happens is when we push forward towards that goal, when we remove distractions and we reach that goal, we suddenly discover that there's even more that we can do. There's even more that we can accomplish. And so we keep pressing forward and we become even better people. We accomplish more than we thought possible. We remove distractions and we find another false peak and another false peak. And we keep improving and we keep getting better. I can tell you, I never dreamt that I would be getting to do this. I never dreamt that I would be working on another book, but I had a goal to write one. And so I got rid of distractions. I chose that as my goal. I focused on it. And then I wrote one. And then I had time to write a second. And then I had time to write a third. And I get to be here today. I've gotten to do things that I never dreamt possible. I think I've been a better father than I ever thought I could be. I hope I've been a more loving husband than I ever thought I could be. I don't know what problem you see in the world. I don't know what goals you have to accomplish. But you keep pushing forward and reach your fullest potential. I think that's how we get to the end of our lives with no regret about the decisions that we chose. I'll end with a quote from Mark Twain. Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days in your life are the day you are born, and the second is the day you discover why." And I like to add a third. The third most important day is the day we throw off anything that distracts us from becoming that person. I will end with that and open this up for questions. We got 10 or 15 minutes. If there's anything that we can talk about, or you want me to talk about this or anything else in my life, I'm top 3 decluttering strategies. I started by the first thing I started by decluttering my car, which was pretty easy to do. Not getting rid of my car, but just decluttering the junk inside of my car, because I was doing my garage and like my car was on the street, and so I pulled it into the garage, and I'm like, why are all these water bottles in here? And like, why is this glove compartment full of all this stuff? And so I decluttered everything out of my car. And the next morning, I got to drive somewhere, and it felt so clean and so nice and so calm. And so literally it becomes my piece of advice that I tell people. Like, if you want to start decluttering, start somewhere easy, someplace where you can see the difference right away. Like literally when you get home tonight, throw everything out of your car that doesn't need to be there. And the next day, it'll feel entirely different. And then just imagine what that can be for your whole life, your bedroom and your locker room and your living room and your kitchen and whatever it might be. So that's always a big one. Number two, I tried experimenting with less, like Project 333, which is you just wear 33 articles of clothing for 3 months. Really limit yourself just to test it out. That was a huge strategy as well. And I'm not sure of a third one. So those are my top two off the top of my head. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, what was the hardest thing to get rid of? I always think the question's funny because the hardest thing for me to ever get rid of, I probably still have, because I just didn't get rid of it. I have a shoebox of baseball cards from when I was a kid that I have just not been able to part with, and so that's the first thing that pops into my mind. Hardest thing to get rid of. My books were really difficult. My books were an interesting one. I had an office and I had 3 big bookshelves full of books when people walked in. And I decided that I didn't need that many, and so I cut it down just to 1 bookshelf. And the hardest thing about doing that was I realized that I had 3 bookcases full of books, not because I had read the books, but because I wanted people to think I had read the books, if that makes sense. People come into my office and there's tons of books, and I think I just thought they thought better of me because of all the books on my shelves. And at some point I thought, well, that's kind of dishonest that I would try to pretend to be someone that I'm not. So that was a hard one, just deciding what books to keep, and also I think just the what I was trying to communicate with the things that I had. But man, we're far better off impressing people with the lives that we live than the things that we own, if you ask me. So I think it really forced me to start doing that better. Yeah. Yeah. Every book I've written, I thought would be my last because they're, for me, they're really hard to write, and I gain a bunch of weight, and have a bunch of headaches, and yeah, they're really hard to do. So the first 2, I had 1 book I wanted to write, and I actually signed a 2-book deal. So I knew I was writing 2. But once I wrote the second one, I thought I was done and I wasn't going to write anymore. Until literally that Charlie-Gilbert question at that conference. And he said, if you died, what would you regret? And I knew that book was a presentation I'd given a lot of different places. And I said, I would regret that I never took that speech, I never took that presentation, and I put it into a book that could outlive me, if that makes sense. Like if I'm not there to give the speech, the book is still there, and people can still find it and still find the message. So that was that book. And then I thought I would be done until a year and a half ago, when this new idea and just something that I had to write, and a message that I thought was uniquely qualified to give. So good question. Yes. Yeah, it depends on the distraction, I think. Uh, well, let's do technology, for example. Let's do our phones because it's probably the most prevalent among us. It's really interesting because I go online and you'll read an article of like 7 tips to stop using your phone so much. And they're like, put a rubber band around your phone and They're like, put on these time blocker apps and go grayscale with your screen. And I don't know, all little things, but they never seem to work. At least they never seem to work for me. And what I've discovered, honestly, is that I think the tip to overcoming the distraction of technology, of our phones, is legitimately we just need to dream bigger dreams for our life than scrolling social media and watching TikTok every day. Like, legitimately, if we start believing in who we are, what we can do, what we can accomplish, what we can become, I think that is how we learn to put the phone away. So, like right now, I'm working on this book, and if I find myself doing another tack of Clash of Clans, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna win this war. And like at some point, I'm like, why am I spending 15 minutes of my day just playing a game when I have a really important book, a really important message that I think I'm uniquely qualified to get out into the world? So I think we dream bigger dreams for our life. I think we recognize how big of a distraction our technology actually becomes. Um, you can get on and you can check your screen time and you can see how much time you spent on this app or that app. But actually, our phones technology is a far bigger distraction than just the actual time that we're on the device. Um, I blew my daughter away with this statistic, so hopefully it resonates here as well. Did you know that it takes 23 minutes to find your focus on something that you're working on? And every time you divert your focus from what you're working on, it takes 23 minutes to get back to where you were before. So if you're reading a book, if you're doing a homework assignment, if you're doing an art project, if you're doing something important and you just check your phone to scroll a little bit or even check a text that comes in, it literally takes you 23 minutes to get back into the same mindset and focus that you were in before you checked your phone. And so I think we dream big dreams for our lives. We realize how big of a potential, how big of a distraction our technology becomes. And then I think we start applying things. Then we decide to leave it in another room. We put it in a drawer. We literally power it down for an hour. We get rid of apps that are distracting us. We put on the time blocking apps, whatever it might be. We ask a friend to hold us accountable who we know is also working on something important. But man, when it comes to phones, I'll like one more, like spend some time of your day away from your phone. Like 1 hour a day, just getting used to it. Like 1 hour a day where it's in a drawer, where it's in a different room. Life's not going to end. Like you'll still be able to reply when you get to the phone later. But man, it is so ubiquitous. Like it is so just a part of our lives that we don't even know how to live life without a phone in our hands or whatever on the screen. So just take an hour a day, go for a run, go for a walk without your phone, go read a book, work on some homework, talk to a friend. I think the more important, do things that make you forget to check your phone, I think is the quote, and I think it's brilliant. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'm about at time. One more. Any others though? Yeah, I guess I got two. I'll go over here. Is my social life a distraction? Um, no, yeah, no, I don't have a social life. No, no, I do. Super involved at church and community and play basketball, and I like to work out, and so there's a lot of different things that I do. The way I find my balance is this. A lot of people work so that they can rest. They work really hard so they can take a really nice vacation, or the goal, they try to get all their work done so they can sit and do nothing. Like, they work so they can um, live a life of leisure. For me, I see it the other way around. I want to rest so that I can do better work. And by that, I mean, I want to rest so that I can be my best self in the world, so I can show up for the world as best I possibly can. And so for me to show up and be the best person that I can be, it involves taking a day of rest. It involves getting sleep. It involves spending time with friends. It involves watching a Suns game in the evening. Like, there are things that I can do that help me rest. And although the Suns aren't very relaxing these days, but there are like some things that I can do. That's how I find the filter. And of course, people are always important to me. So a social life is always going to be important because I think it serves that goal of loving the people around me. But that's how I try to find rest and balance it with work and try to find a whole work-life balance. Last question. Okay, great. I love writing books. Yeah. Okay. Um, you know, I think a lot of the kids get their cues from us as parents. I think a lot of us as parents get upset when our kids want things that they don't need. Meanwhile, we've got a closet full of clothes. We've got a garage so full of stuff that we can't park in. Like, we've got boxes and boxes of stuff in our basement. And I literally think that we've just become so accustomed to living a life with more things that we need, that preschoolers and young kids, and I think it's a bit of human nature as well, but it just kind of feeds into that. So how do we do it? Number one, like, we have to model it ourselves. Like, we work really hard to not buy stuff we don't need, and live a life where we're spending our time and our money on things that actually matter rather than things that we don't. And then I've always been a big fan of over explaining to kids. I think we explain why we're not going to buy this and why we're not going to do that. Um, you know what? We're not going to buy that because we already have one at home, and we use our money to give to this charity, or we use our money to go out for dinner or go on vacation, or we support these other things with our money instead. So that's kind of a short answer to it, but hope it's partly helpful. Wonderful. No, sorry, I tried to look away. Okay. Do you want me to keep taking questions, or because I'm happy to? It's 11:05, so I know we have snacks over here. And oh yeah, okay, sure. Well, this is great. You guys got a lot of fun things going on. Now, let's see. What do we got? How many of you been here more than 1 year? So this would be like, you're not freshmen, right? You've been here. How many are freshmen? This is your very first year? Oh, all right. Wonderful. Well, I know the list of activities that you have going on this week, and it's amazing stuff, and there's wonderful opportunities, and so take advantage of that. Um, so much of college is not just what happens in the classroom, but what happens outside of it. So take advantage of that.